The first thing Josiah Cole saw under that white canvas was a wrist. Rope burns had carved black circles into the skin deep enough that they looked permanent like brands. The second thing was the crucifix pressed against her throat, the silver chain tangled so tight it had left indentations. Someone had tried to strangle her with her own faith. September morning came cold to the Bitterroot Mountains, the kind of cold that warns a man winter is watching from just over the ridge. Josiah had been checking his trap lines when he found the wagon at the creek crossing a quarter-mile from his cabin. No mule, no driver, just the wagon itself sitting there like something the forest had coughed up and wanted nothing to do with. He approached the way a man approaches anything unexpected in the wilderness. Rifle ready, eyes scanning the tree line, breathing measured and quiet. The canvas covering the wagon bed was lashed tight, pulled so taut the fabric looked ready to split. But underneath something moved. Barely. A tremor so faint it might have been wind, except there was no wind that morning. Josiah cut the ropes with his hunting knife. The canvas fell away. A young woman lay curled in the wagon bed wearing a black habit and white coif stained the color of old blood. Her wrists and ankles were bound with rope thick enough to tie down cargo. A strip of cloth had been shoved into her mouth as a gag. Her eyes were open, staring at nothing past the point where fear lives and into whatever comes after. When she finally focused on his face, on his scarred hands cutting through the rope, her lips moved behind the gag. Josiah pulled the cloth from her mouth as gently as he could. Her voice came out hoarse, broken by days of screaming or days of silence, he could not tell which. "You paid for me. Now do it." Josiah froze. The rope fell from his hands. "Ma'am, I did not pay for anybody." Her eyes did not change. They stayed empty like windows into a house where no one lived anymore. "Then send me back, or kill me. I do not care which." She swallowed the motion, painful to watch. "Just make it mean something." Josiah looked at her wrists, at the crucifix, at the habit torn at the shoulder where someone had tried to rip it off and given up halfway. He looked at the note tucked into the rope at her feet. Cheap paper, bold ink, 3 lines that stood out like they had been written specifically to burn into his memory. J. Cole, paid in full, Warwick Freight. Below that a receipt stub showing $300. His entire spring fur payment, dated 2 weeks ago. A shipping notation in smaller print. Specialty item number 7. Deliver Montana Territory. The morning felt colder after that. Josiah cut the rest of the rope, careful not to nick her skin. When the last strand fell away, her hands did not reach for freedom. They stayed close to her chest, guarding whatever small piece of herself she still trusted not to break. He lifted her from the wagon anyway. She weighed almost nothing, like something already half gone. His cabin was built from lodgepole pine chinked with mud and moss, small enough that a single fire could heat the whole space. One room, one table with 2 chairs his wife had insisted on 7 years ago, because civilized people do not eat standing up. A bear skin on the wall from the grizzly that took 2 of his fingers before he put it down. Margaret's Bible on a shelf, the only book he owned untouched since the day they buried her. He set the nun on his bunk, the only real furniture besides the table. She sat without being told to sit, drank water. When he handed her the cup, swallowed mechanically like her body remembered how, even if her mind had left. He stepped back, gave her space, and watched her the way you watch an animal caught in a trap, trying to decide if it will run or bite. Her posture was strange. Even broken, even hollow, she sat with her back straight. Years of training, he guessed, the kind that becomes reflex. But her hands kept drifting toward the crucifix at her throat and then jerking away like she wanted to touch it but could not bear to. "How long were you in that wagon?" Silence. 3 days, 4. Her voice cracked when she finally spoke. "I do not know. I lost count." "Where did they take you?" Her eyes met his. The first real emotion he had seen from her surfaced then. Not fear, not grief, rage. Everywhere. She told him the rest without prompting, the words coming out like confession, like something she had been holding back so long it hurt to keep inside. 6 nuns and 1 priest traveling from St. Louis to the mission in Helena. Ambushed in the mountain pass 4 days ago. Men in mass, but organized, not bandits. Professionals who knew exactly what they were doing and who they were looking for. The priest was shot. She thought he was dead. The nuns were separated. She was picked. The young one, they said. The pretty one, premium price. 3 days in a freight depot. She would not say what happened there. Then she woke in the wagon yesterday with the note pinned to her habit. They said you ordered me, paid extra, for a specific item. Josiah showed her the receipt, his money, his name. He had not ordered anything. He explained slowly the way you explain things to someone whose mind is still catching up to their body. He sold furs at Fort Benton 3 times a year. Payment came through Warwick Freight Company because they handled most of the trade in the territory. Someone had used his account without permission, added a line to his ledger, made him the buyer of record. The realization hit them both at the same time. This was not random. This was targeted. Someone wanted her delivered to him specifically. Why you? Josiah's jaw went tight. The muscles in his face pulled like rope under strain. I have history with Warwick. He stepped outside to examine the wagon more carefully. She followed steadier, now finding strength in anger or purpose, or maybe just the need to understand. He checked the wheels, the undercarriage, the driver's seat. Then he found the hidden compartment beneath the bench, a space meant for valuables or documents or things a man wants to keep secret. Inside was a locket, silver, engraved with initials MC Margaret Cole, the locket he had given his wife on their wedding day. Josiah's hands started to shake. Just once, just enough to make the locket tremble before he closed his fist around it. The nun watched his face change, watched grief turn into something harder. Who is Margaret? Margaret was my wife. He talked while he searched the rest of the wagon, his voice flat, the words coming out like stones dropped one at a time into dark water. 7 years ago, Margaret was a school teacher at Fort Benton. Smart woman, curious. She noticed things. Girls going missing from the saloons and boarding houses, young women disappearing and never being found. She started asking questions at the freight depot, found ledgers showing specialty cargo shipments, saw patterns, numbers that did not make sense unless you understood what was really being shipped. She brought evidence to the sheriff. The sheriff worked for Warwick. A week later, Margaret was killed by a grizzly on the trail. At least that was what the report said. Body found mauled, declared an animal attack case closed. But Josiah knew. No grizzly in that area that season. And the tracks around her body were boot prints, covered sloppy, like someone had been in a hurry or did not care if they were found. He tried to investigate. Got shut down, no proof. Everyone too scared to talk. He nearly got hanged for disturbing the peace. So he fled to the mountains and swore he would never let another man's evil touch his life again. And now here I am. Josiah looked at her, this woman who asked questions and paid the price. This woman who was like Margaret in all the ways that mattered. Yeah, here you are. What will you do with me? He considered that. Considered the options. Considered what Margaret would have wanted him to do. Whatever you want. I want to disappear. Cannot do that. Warwick knows you are here now. He put you here. This is a message. He held up the locket so she could see. He kept a trophy from my wife's murder. Put it in your wagon so I would know. This is not business. This is personal. He wants me to understand he can reach me anywhere. The nun's face went pale. Understanding settled over her like frost. Then what? Long pause. Morning light coming through the trees, now gold and cold at the same time. Make you untouchable. Legally. She did not understand at first. He explained it the way Margaret had taught him, using small words and plain logic. As purchased cargo, she had no legal standing in the territory. Could be reclaimed like property, unless she had a different legal status. Unless she became something the law recognized as more than freight. Wife. The word hung between them. Marriage certificate gives you rights, a name, protection. Warwick cannot claim the wife of a citizen as cargo. It is a paper shield, nothing more. She stood. The black habit swirled around her legs. She paced the small cabin like something caged, something wild that had been caught and was trying to remember how to be free. I took vows to Kidminad before witnesses, binding. I know. You are asking me to commit sacrilege. I am asking you to survive. Her anger flared, then hot and sudden, the first real fire he had seen from her. You do not understand. Those vows are all I have left. Her voice broke. She pressed both hands to her face. My parents are dead. My sisters are dead. My brothers are dead. The only thing that makes me anything other than another orphan girl is Sister Abigail. Without the vows, who am I? Josiah walked to the shelf. He had not touched Margaret's Bible in 7 years. Dust covered the leather binding. He opened it to a page marked with a dried wildflower pressed flat and brown, but still holding its shape. Margaret loved this story. Woman named Ruth. She left everything, chose a new path, still served God. He held the book so Sister Abigail could see. Ruth made a vow to Naomi, broke it when circumstances changed. The Bible is full of people who broke rules to save lives. Rahab, Tamar, even David. Sister Abigail stared at the page. Her hands trembled. Ruth was not a nun. No, but she made promises. And when staying would have meant death, she chose life instead. Sister Abigail sat down hard like her legs had given out. She took the Bible from his hands and read the passage. Read it again. Then she bowed her head and began praying the rosary, the beads sliding through her fingers one by one, her lips moving in Latin he could not understand. She prayed all night. Josiah made coffee at dawn and set a cup beside her. She did not touch it, just kept praying, tears running down her face, the rosary beads clicking soft and rhythmic like a heartbeat. When the sun finally broke over the ridge, she set the rosary down. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. I will do it. You are sure? No, but Margaret chose you. Maybe God is too. Josiah nodded slowly. He understood what that cost her, understood the weight of breaking something holy. For what it is worth, I will honor it as real. I will not ask more than you are willing to give. Even if I am never willing, even then. She looked at him for the first time without fear or calculation. Just looked and saw a man carrying grief the same way she carried vows. Like weight that never quite goes away, but you learn to walk with it anyway. Then we go, before I lose courage. Josiah packed quickly. Rifles, ammunition, dried venison, hardtack blankets. He found Margaret's wedding ring in a tin box hidden under a loose floorboard and slipped it into his pocket. Sister Abigail changed clothes, keeping the habit underneath, but borrowing his old coat over it. She would not abandon her identity completely. Not yet. They rode double on his strongest horse, Sister Abigail sitting behind him, arms wrapped around his waist for balance. Fort Benton was 18 miles down the mountain, a half-day's ride if the weather held. The trail was narrow, winding through stands of lodgepole pine and aspen already turning gold. They rode in silence for the first hour. Comfortable silence. Both of them used to quiet. Then Josiah started pointing out landmarks. Grizzly territory here, stay alert. Water source there, safe to drink. Elk trails crossing the path. Sister Abigail surprised him. How do you know about the grizzly? Scat, claw marks on the trees, fresh ones. Teach me. He glanced back over his shoulder. Why be doing them? Because I am tired of being helpless. So he taught her while they rode. How to read animal signs. Which plants were edible and which would kill you. How to tell direction by the moss on the north side of trees. She learned fast. Educated mind hungry for practical knowledge she had never needed before. You are good at this. I am good at surviving. I have had to be. An hour from Fort Benton, they heard moaning off the trail. Josiah reined the horse and dismounted, rifle ready. Sister Abigail stayed mounted but alert. The sound came from a ravine 20 yards into the trees. A man in priest's clothing rested there, blood soaking through the shoulder of his cassock, face pale with fever. Sister Abigail gasped, Father Michael. She slid from the horse and ran to him. Josiah followed, scanning the tree line for threats. The priest's eyes flickered open, unfocused and glazed. Sister Abigail, you are alive. I am Father. Thank God, I thought they killed everyone. Josiah knelt beside them. How did you survive? Left for dead, crawled, 3 days, following wagon tracks. Father Michael's hand gripped Sister Abigail's wrist with surprising strength for a man half dead. Must get to the fort. Send telegram. The church must know. Sister Abigail and Josiah exchanged a look. If the church knew if Mother Superior was informed, she would order Sister Abigail home immediately, would invalidate any marriage, would leave her vulnerable to Warwick's claim. We do not tell him. Not yet. Josiah kept his voice low. That is lying to a priest. Sister Abigail's jaw set. Something hard entered her eyes. I have already chosen sacrilege. One more sin will not damn me worse. They lifted Father Michael onto the horse. He drifted in and out of consciousness, muttering prayers and warnings. The fort appeared below them as they descended the final ridge, a cluster of buildings around a stockade wall, smoke rising from chimneys, the sounds of commerce and humanity drifting up the slope. Josiah tensed. He had not been to civilization in months, had not wanted to be. Too many memories, too many ghosts. But the nun behind him needed this, needed the paper shield. So he rode down into Fort Benton with his past chewing at his heels and his future uncertain as the weather. They brought Father Michael to the doctor first, a gruff man named Henderson who took one look at the wound and shook his head. Infected, needs days of rest, maybe weeks. Father Michael tried to protest, but Henderson pushed him down onto the cot. You move, you die. Simple as that. The priest passed out. Henderson looked at Josiah and Sister Abigail. You family, Josiah hesitated. Something like that. They left Father Michael in Henderson's care and walked through the fort. Sister Abigail stayed close to Josiah's side, conscious of the stares. Her habit was visible under the coat, and people noticed. Some looks were respectful. Some were suspicious. A nun traveling alone with a mountain man. Questions would be asked. Josiah asked around for the justice of the peace, was directed to Judge Samuel Ketchum's office near the stockade wall, a small room crammed with law books and papers and the smell of tobacco smoke. The judge sat behind a desk carved from a single slab of cottonwood, an old man with white hair and eyes that missed nothing. Need a marriage certificate. Judge Ketchum looked up from whatever he was writing. You two know each other long. Long enough. The judge studied them. Studied the habit visible under Sister Abigail's coat. Studied the rope burns on her wrists that the sleeves did not quite cover. You want this, sister? She startled. He recognized what she was. Yes. Yes, you want it, or yes, you are being coerced. Sister Abigail met his eyes, drew herself up straight, found her voice. Yes, I want to live. Judge Ketchum leaned back in his chair. It creaked under his weight. I married 47 couples this year. Most of them barely knew each other. This territory is hard on women, especially ones alone. He closed the law book in front of him. I have learned not to judge circumstances. God does that. To Sister Abigail directly now. You will regret this, probably. But you will be alive to regret it. That is the plan. He almost smiled. Almost. Good enough for me. The ceremony happened in the corner of the office. No flowers, no music. Just a law book, a candle, and two witnesses pulled in from the street. A freight clerk and Dr. Henderson, who had come looking for payment and agreed to stay for 30 seconds. Judge Ketchum opened the law book to the marriage statute. Name, Sister Abigail's voice came out steady. Sister Abigail Ruth Brennan. Just Abigail now, miss. She swallowed. Shedding her identity felt like shedding skin. Abigail Ruth Brennan. And you, Josiah Cole. The judge looked at them both. Do you, Josiah Cole, take this woman as your lawful wife? Josiah did not hesitate. I do. Do you, Abigail Ruth Brennan, take this man as your lawful husband? Long pause. Everyone held their breath. The freight clerk shifted his weight. Dr. Henderson checked his pocket watch. Sister Abigail's voice came out barely above a whisper, but it was firm. I do. By the power vested in me by the Montana Territory, I pronounce you married. God have mercy on you both. They signed the certificate. Josiah's handwriting was rough but legible. Margaret had taught him. Abigail's was perfect, educated, the letters flowing like water. The witnesses signed below. Judge Ketchum applied his seal and handed the paper to Josiah. That will be $5. Josiah paid. They turned to leave. The door burst open. A man entered with two hired guns behind him, well-dressed, clean-shaven, smiling like a man who owned the room and everyone in it. He looked at the certificate in Josiah's hand, looked at Sister Abigail. The smile never wavered, but something cold passed behind his eyes. Well, this is unexpected. Josiah's hand moved toward his knife. The hired guns tensed. Ezekiel Warwick held up one hand, still smiling. No need for that, Mr. Cole. I am just here on business. Judge Ketchum stood. Mr. Warwick, this is a legal proceeding. Is it when the bride is stolen property? Warwick pulled papers from his coat, unfolded them slowly, deliberately. A bill of sale, a shipping manifest, both showing Josiah's account charged $300. both showing specialty cargo delivered to J. Cole, Montana territory. You married her, clever, but under territorial law, if a purchase was made even fraudulently, the goods must be returned or paid for in full. Warwick's smile widened. You married my cargo. That is theft. Josiah's voice came out flat and hard. I did not buy her. Prove it. Abigail stood. Her voice shook, but she forced it steady. I am not cargo. I am his wife. Warwick looked at her. Really looked. Something in his face shifted, something personal and cruel. You know what my daughter would say if she was still alive? He stepped closer. She would say nuns are parasites, hiding from the real world behind vows, pretending to be holy when they are just cowards. His voice dropped lower, intimate and venomous. So I am doing you a favor. Welcome to reality. He turned toward the door. I will give you 24 hours. Return her or I press charges for theft and kidnapping. He paused at the threshold and looked back at Josiah. And Mr. Cole, I put your first wife in the ground. Do not test me. The door closed. Silence filled the office like smoke. No one moved. No one breathed. Abigail's voice came out small. He killed Margaret. Josiah stood frozen, the marriage certificate crumpling in his fist. He just admitted it. Judge Ketchum sat down slowly. That is not an admission that will hold in court. Not without proof. Then what do we do? Josiah looked at the certificate, looked at the woman who was now legally his wife, looked at the door Warwick had just walked through. We run or we fight. Abigail surprised herself with how quickly the words came. We fight. The old judge studied them both. These two people who had known each other less than a day, but were bound together now by paper and desperation in something that might become more if they survived long enough. Then you better be ready, because Ezekiel Warwick does not lose, not in this territory, and he just made this personal. Josiah folded the marriage certificate and tucked it inside his coat close to his heart, where Margaret's locket rested in his pocket. It was already personal, 7 years ago. Outside, the afternoon sun slanted low through the fort. Somewhere beyond the stockade walls, 5 nuns waited in chains, not knowing one of their sisters had just broken her vows to save them all. Somewhere in the mountains, autumn was turning to winter, and the first snow was gathering strength. And somewhere between the law and the lawless, between the sacred and the necessary, Josiah Cole and Abigail Brennan stood together for the first time as husband and wife, neither knowing if the words would protect them or destroy them, but both knowing there was no going back now. The bargain was struck. The paper was signed. The only question left was whether they would live long enough to decide if it meant anything at all. Night came fast to Fort Benton the way it always does in September when the days are losing their fight against winter. Clara Stone's boarding house sat at the edge of the settlement, 3 stories of weathered timber that leaned slightly to the east like it was tired of standing up straight. Clara herself answered the door when Josiah knocked, a woman in her mid-30s with work-worn hands and eyes that had seen too much and trusted too little. Need 2 rooms. Clara looked past him at Abigail, took in the habit visible under the borrowed coat, the rope burns on her wrists, the way she stood close to Josiah like she was afraid of the space between them. 2 rooms or one? She is your wife. She is. Clara's eyes narrowed, but she stepped aside. Be careful. Warwick has ears everywhere. Abigail caught the tone, the fear underneath the words. You are afraid of him. Clara would not meet her eyes. Everyone is. The room was small, 1 bed, 1 chair, 1 window that looked out over the fort's main street. Josiah barred the door and checked the window frame to make sure it would open if they needed to leave fast. Abigail sat on the bed exhausted, but her hands found the rosary beads in her pocket out of habit. She began to pray silently, the beads sliding through her fingers one by one. Josiah noticed. You still pray? Muscle memory? Does it help? She paused, looked at the beads in her hand like she was seeing them for the first time. I do not know anymore. Silence settled between them. Outside, the sounds of the fort at night. Voices from the saloon 2 buildings down. A dog barking. Somewhere a woman laughing. Josiah checked his rifle, loading and unloading it the way some men fidget with coins. Abigail watched him work, methodical and precise, every movement practiced until it was automatic. We need proof Warwick is trafficking. How TM, his freight office, ledgers. That is breaking and entering. He looked at her, almost smiled but not quite. You have moral objections now. This time she did smile, brief and bitter. Not anymore. They took turns sleeping. Josiah took the first watch, sitting in the chair by the window with his rifle across his knees. Abigail lay on the bed, fully clothed, the habit twisted around her legs, one hand on the crucifix at her throat. She did not sleep so much as collapse into something that looked like sleep but felt like drowning. When she woke 3 hours later, Josiah was still in the chair, still watching the street. She sat up disoriented. You did not wake me for my turn. You needed the rest more. That is not fair. Fair does not matter. Survival does. She wanted to argue, but the exhaustion in his voice stopped her. This man who had married a stranger and risked everything for someone else's battle. She studied his profile in the moonlight coming through the window. The scar down his left cheek from the grizzly. The way he held his left hand favoring the fingers that were still whole. Why did you really do it? Marry me. Long pause. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet enough that she had to strain to hear. Because letting evil win quiet is how decent men lose themselves. I let it happen once. With Margaret. I will not make that mistake again. Even for a stranger. Especially for a stranger. Strangers do not owe me anything. Which means when I help them, it is because it is right. Not because it is convenient. Abigail felt something shift in her chest. Not gratitude. Something deeper. Something dangerous. I'm glad it was you at that creek crossing. I'm glad it was your name on that wagon. Josiah turned to look at her then. Their eyes met across the small room. So am I. Morning brought Dr. Henderson to their door. Father Michael was awake and asking for Sister Abigail. They walked through the fort to Henderson's clinic, a one-room building that smelled like carbolic acid and old blood. The priest lay on a cot near the window, pale but lucid, his shoulder bandaged thick with cotton and gauze. When he saw the wedding ring on Abigail's hand, his face drained of what little color it had. Sister Abigail, what have you done? She could not meet his eyes. Father Michael turned his gaze on Josiah, and there was nothing gentle in it. You took advantage. She was vulnerable. Josiah's voice came out flat. She chose. She is not free to choose. She is consecrated to God. The priest tried to sit up. Henderson pushed him back down with one firm hand. Stay still or you will tear the stitches. Father Michael ignored him, his eyes fixed on Abigail. Do you understand what you have done? The vows you made were not suggestions. They were binding before God and the church. Abigail's voice came out smaller than she wanted. Father, I was cargo in a wagon, marked with a price. God tests us through suffering. Job was tested. Abraham was tested. Your suffering had purpose. God did not put me in that wagon. Men did. Her voice grew stronger. Men who are still out there, still taking women, still destroying lives, and you want me to die quietly so I can pass some test? Father Michael's expression shifted. Confusion replaced certainty. I want you to trust in God's plan. I am trying, but maybe God's plan included a mountain man who cut my ropes instead of using them. Maybe God's plan included surviving long enough to stop the men who did this. She stepped closer to the bed. You were there, Father. You saw them attack. You saw what they did. Can you honestly tell me God wanted that? God allows evil so that good men can choose to fight it? Then that is what I am doing. I am fighting it. The only way I know how. Father Michael fell silent. His eyes moved between Abigail and Josiah, measuring, calculating, trying to reconcile doctrine with reality. The other nuns, where are they? Abigail explained. 5 nuns still missing, probably held by Warwick either at his warehouse or already sold. Every day that passed made finding them harder, made saving them less likely. Father Michael closed his eyes. His lips moved in silent prayer. When he opened them again, something had changed, not acceptance, but recognition. I will help you, but after this is over, you must seek dispensation from your vows, through proper channels. Do you understand? If we survive, I will. That is not good enough. It is all I can promise. The priest studied her face, saw the woman she had become in the days since the attack. Not the novice who took vows at 21. Someone harder, someone who had seen the worst of humanity and decided to fight back instead of fold. Then I suppose it will have to be. Josiah spoke for the first time since they entered. The Freywood office. You passed it before the attack. Yes, Warwick's main operation, 2 stories. His office is on the second floor, locked, guarded at night by at least 2 men. How do we get past the guards? Father Michael almost smiled. The expression looked strange on his pale face. I am a priest. I will hear confessions. That night, the plan took shape. Father Michael would go to the saloon next to the freight office, announce loudly that he was hearing confessions for any man with sin on his soul. Drunk miners would laugh. But the guilty ones, the ones who grew up Catholic and still carried that guilt like a stone in their chest, they would come. And the guards would drift over, too curious or compelled, or both. While they were distracted, Josiah and Abigail would slip inside. They waited until midnight. The fort was quieter then, but not silent. Never silent. There was always someone awake in a place like this. Always someone watching. They moved through the shadows between buildings, avoiding the main street where lanterns still burned. Father Michael arrived at the saloon right on schedule despite Henderson's protests. His voice carried through the open door strong despite the pain he was clearly in. Any man with sin on his soul, I am hearing confessions tonight. God's mercy does not sleep even if you do. Laughter erupted from inside. But then slowly men started to emerge. A miner with guilt written across his face. A freight clerk who had stolen from his employer. A soldier who had abandoned his post. They formed a line, shamefaced and desperate, and Father Michael heard them one by one right there on the saloon steps. The guards from the freight office drifted closer. Both of them, Catholics who had not been to confession in years, but remembered the ritual, remembered the relief. They joined the line. Josiah and Abigail slipped through the freight office's back door. The lock was simple. Josiah picked it with a piece of bent wire and his hunting knife techniques he had learned in the army when locks were the difference between eating and starving. The door opened with barely a sound. Inside, the office was dark and still. Stairs led to the second floor. They climbed slowly, testing each step for creaks before putting their full weight down. At the top, another locked door. This one took longer. Josiah's hands shook slightly as he worked, whether from nerves or the cold, or both. Abigail could not tell. The lock clicked. The door swung open. Warwick's office was neat, too neat, organized like a man who needed control over every detail of his life. A desk sat in the center with papers stacked in precise piles. Shelves lined the walls full of ledgers and files and documents that looked important because they were bound in leather instead of paper. Josiah went straight for the desk, tried the drawers, all locked. He pried open the center drawer with his knife wood splintering under the blade. Inside, a single ledger with a lock on the cover. He broke that too. Abigail kept watch at the door, her heart hammering so hard she was sure everyone in Fort Benton could hear it. She had never done anything like this. Breaking into buildings, stealing documents. These were not the actions of a sister of mercy. These were the actions of someone who had decided survival mattered more than rules. Got it. Josiah opened the ledger. Pages and pages of entries, all in code. Numbers and letters that meant nothing at first glance. But Abigail had been educated by nuns who believed knowledge was the only real power women could have. She knew Latin, knew codes, knew patterns. She moved to his side, reading over his shoulder. Item 7. That is me. Her finger traced the line. Her name was not there, just a description. Female 29, educated religious order. Purchase price $300. Delivery location, J. Cole, Montana Territory. Above her entry, 6 more. Items 1 through 6, the other nuns. Below more entries. 8 women sold the previous month. Destinations listed by initials. Mining camps, lumber operations, railroad construction sites. Josiah flipped backward through the pages. Years of entries, hundreds of women, each reduced to a line in a ledger, a price, a destination. Then he found it. An entry from 1869. His hands stopped moving. His breath stopped moving. Everything stopped. M. Cole. Item 47. Disposed via arranged accident. Payment $500. Proof, written proof that Margaret was murdered, that it was not a grizzly, that Warwick had ordered it and someone had paid for it. Abigail saw his face, saw the grief and rage warring there, threatening to spill over into something violent and irreversible. Josiah. He did not hear her. His hands gripped his ledger so tight the leather creaked. Josiah. She put her hand over his, forced him to look at her. Not now, later. We need to finish this. He nodded, barely. But enough. He kept turning pages, forcing himself to focus. Near the end of the ledger, a list of names, not items. Actual names, buyers, Territorial Judge Millard Crenshaw, Sheriff Thomas Brennan, Fort Commander Colonel David Hayes, a dozen others. Men in positions of power and authority. Men who should have been stopping this instead of profiting from it. Warwick's network went all the way to the top. We need to photograph these pages. Abigail looked at him like he had lost his mind. Photograph with what? Josiah pulled a small metal device from his coat, smaller than a book, a camera, the kind the Army used for reconnaissance. Learned this during the war. Fast exposure, good enough for evidence. He worked quickly, photographing page after page by the light of a single candle. The clicking sound felt too loud in the silent office. Any moment the guards would return, any moment someone would notice. Footsteps on the stairs. Josiah froze. Abigail's breath caught in her throat. They looked at each other, both calculating distances and options and whether they could jump from the second-floor window without breaking something important. The footsteps reached the landing, paused, then moved past, continuing up to the third floor. They had seconds, maybe less. Josiah photographed the last page, closed the ledger, put it back in the drawer exactly as he had found it. They moved to the window, outside a narrow alley, a drop of maybe 12 feet onto packed dirt. You first. Abigail climbed through the window, hung from the sill, and dropped. She hit hard, her ankle twisting under her. Pain shot up her leg, but she bit back the scream. Josiah dropped beside her a moment later, landing better, pulling her up. They ran, limping, stumbling, but running. Behind them, shouts erupted from the freight office. Alarm raised. Someone had found the broken locks. They made it back to the boarding house, just as lanterns started moving through the fort. Men organizing a search. Clara met them at the door, her face white with terror. They are looking for you, ooh. Josiah pushed past her, pulling Abigail inside. How did you know? Because Warwick was here 10 minutes ago, looking. Abigail felt her stomach drop. You told him. Clara's face crumpled. Tears started streaming down her cheeks. I had to. He has my son. The words hung in the air like smoke. Abigail and Josiah stared at her, understanding dawning slowly and terribly. Clara collapsed into a chair, sobbing. My husband died 3 years ago. Mine accident. Left me with debts I could not pay and a boy to feed. Warwick offered help. Said Daniel could work at the freight office. Apprentice work. Learn a trade. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. But Daniel is not an apprentice. He is a prisoner. Warwick keeps him there. Uses him to make sure I cooperate. Pass information. Tell him when strangers come to town asking questions. Her voice broke. He is 14 years old. He is all I have. I am sorry. I am so sorry. But he is my son. Josiah stood very still. Abigail expected him to rage, to storm out, to abandon them both. Instead, his voice came out quiet. Where is he, your boy? Freight office, Warwick keeps him in the loft, locked in at night. What does he look like? Clara described Daniel through her tears. Tall for his age, brown hair, thin, scared. Josiah looked at Abigail. The warehouse raid just got bigger. You would save her son after she betrayed us. Would not you for family? Abigail thought about the 5 nuns still in chains, her sisters in faith, if not in blood. Thought about what she would do to save them. Yes. She turned to Clara. Help us. Real help this time. Tell us everything about the warehouse, and we will get Daniel back. Clara's eyes went wide with something that might have been hope or might have been disbelief. You would do that? We would. Clara told them everything, the warehouse layout, the cellar where the women were kept soundproof and locked, the loft where Daniel was held, the guards usually 4 to 6 depending on the night, the fact that Warwick sometimes stayed late going over his books, planning his next shipments. If you are going to do this, do it tonight, before he moves everyone. He said something about a freight wagon leaving tomorrow, taking cargo north. Abigail's blood went cold. The 5 nuns, being moved. Once they left Fort Benton, finding them would be nearly impossible. A knock at the door made everyone freeze. Clara moved to answer it, her hand shaking. A man stood there, older maybe 55 with a U.S. Marshal badge pinned to his coat and eyes that had seen violence and learned not to flinch from it. Clara Stone. Yes. I am looking for Josiah Cole. Clara started to lie, but Josiah stepped forward. I am Cole. The marshal studied him, then looked past him at Abigail, taking in the habit, the rope burns the wedding ring that was too new to be anything but recent. Marshal William Hatcher, need to talk to you about Ezekiel Warwick. Everyone tensed. Was this another of Warwick's men? Another corrupt official on the take? Hatcher seemed to sense their suspicion. He held up both hands. Not here to arrest you, here because I want Warwick as much as you do, maybe more. He stepped inside and Clara closed the door behind him. Been tracking Warwick for 8 years. Never had enough of proof to touch him. Too many people protecting him. Too much money changing hands. Then I heard about a nun getting married to a mountain man. Heard about a break-in at the freight office tonight. He looked directly at Josiah. You found something in that office, something worth breaking in for. Josiah said nothing, just watched, calculating whether this man could be trusted or whether he was about to make everything worse. Hatcher reached into his coat. Everyone tensed. He pulled out a photograph. Worn at the edges from years of handling, a young woman's face, maybe 20 years old, smiling. My sister, Helen, went missing 1868. She was traveling west with a church group, never made it to her destination. He looked at the photograph like it hurt to see, but hurt worse not to. I think Warwick sold her, like he is selling everyone else. I have been looking for proof for 8 years, never found enough, until maybe now. He looked up. You got something from that office. Ledgers, evidence, I need it. Josiah pulled out the camera, showed Hatcher the exposed plates. The marshal's hands shook as he took them. This is it. This is what I need. He looked at Josiah with something like gratitude and something like grief. But photographs are not enough. Can be forged, claimed as fake. I need the actual ledger. Need witness testimony. Need the victims rescued and willing to testify. We are raiding the warehouse tonight. Hatcher nodded slowly. Then I am coming with you. Make it legal. How many men do you have? Just me. Against 6 guards. The marshal's smile was cold. I am very motivated. Father Michael appeared in the doorway, then leaning heavily on Dr. Henderson's shoulder. The priest was pale and sweating, but his eyes were clear. 7 of us. Henderson tried to push him back. You can barely walk. Then I will pray loudly. God does not require standing. Abigail moved to the center of the room. Everyone looked at her. The nun who was not a nun anymore. The cargo that became a wife. The woman who had broken every rule she ever lived by and was about to break more. I have an idea. Use me as bait. Josiah started to protest, but she held up her hand. Warwick wants me back. Let him think he can have me. I walk to the warehouse, hands up, surrendering. Draw him and the guards outside. She looked at each of them in turn. While they are distracted, you breach from the back. Free the nuns, free Daniel, take the ledger, and we end this. Josiah stepped close to her. I do not like it. You married me to protect me. Now let me protect others. If anything happens to you, then you finish it anyway. Their eyes held. Something passed between them that had nothing to do with bargains or paper or convenience. Something that felt dangerously close to the thing neither of them was ready to name. Stay visible. I lose sight of you, I am coming in. Deal. Midnight approached. They armed themselves with whatever weapons they could find. Josiah had his rifle and knife. Marshal Hatcher had a shotgun and 2 pistols. Father Michael had a small derringer that Henderson had given him for self-defense. Clara stayed behind but gave them detailed drawings of the warehouse layout. They moved through the fort like ghosts. The warehouse district was dark and quiet, except for the sound of the river and the occasional creak of buildings settling. Warwick's warehouse sat at the edge of the settlement, close to the water, where boats could load and unload cargo without too many eyes watching. Abigail removed her borrowed coat. Let the habit show fully. She looked like what she was supposed to be. A nun. Someone consecrated and set apart. Someone who should have been safe. She walked to the front door and knocked. A guard opened it. Young, maybe 25. His eyes went wide when he saw her. What the? I am here to see Mr. Warwick. Tell him Sister Abigail surrendered. The guard stared at her like she had lost her mind. Maybe she had, but she kept her voice steady and her hands visible, and waited. He closed the door. Voices inside. Argument. Then the door opened again, and Ezekiel Warwick stood there, calm as a Sunday morning, smiling like he had won something. Sister Abigail, or is it Mrs. Cole now? She did not sit, did not move, just stood in the doorway with her hands folded in front of her like she was about to pray. I want to make a deal. I am listening. Let the other nuns go. Keep me. Warwick studied her face, looking for the lie, looking for the trap. Why would I do that? Because I am more valuable, educated, young, worth more than 5 traumatized women that nobody wants. His smile widened slightly. You are also married. That complicates things. Annul it. I will sign anything. Just let them go. And Cole, leave him alone. He did not know about any of this. Warwick walked to the window overlooking the warehouse floor below. He gestured for her to follow. She did, keeping her distance, watching his hands. Below, in a cellar cage barely visible from the office window, 5 women in nuns' habits huddled together. Alive. Terrified. Praying. Abigail's breath caught. They were alive. You see them? Your sisters. Yes. They have been praying for you. For salvation. His voice was soft, almost kind. That made it worse somehow. Well, here you are. He turned to face her. But you are too late. He snapped his fingers. Guards appeared from the shadows. Already sold them. Tomorrow morning, Freya wagon takes them north to the mining camps. Men there pay premium prices for educated women. Teachers for their children during the day. Comfort at night. Abigail felt the trap close around her. She had walked right into it. You came to save them, you will join them instead. He pulled a gun from his coat, not pointing it at her yet, just holding it. A reminder of who had power here. You cost me a great deal of trouble, sister. Time to pay what you owe. Gunshots erupted from the back of the warehouse. Josiah and Marshall Hatcher breaching the cellar. Warwick spun toward the sound, momentarily distracted. Father Michael burst through the office door, leaning on Henderson, his wounded shoulder bleeding through the bandage. He raised one hand like he was giving a blessing. In nomine Patris, Warwick shot him. The bullet hit Father Michael's leg, spinning him sideways. He went down hard. Henderson shouted. Abigail screamed and launched herself at Warwick. They grappled. She was smaller, weaker, but rage gave her strength she did not know she had. The gun fell from his hands. They stumbled toward the railing overlooking the warehouse floor. 2 stories down, Josiah fighting guards below, the sound of keys and locks, women's voices crying out. Warwick shoved her toward the railing. She grabbed his coat, pulled him with her. For one frozen moment, they balanced on the edge together. Then physics decided. They fell. The world spun. Abigail saw the ceiling, the floor, Josiah's face looking up in horror. Then she hit. Hay bales, stacked for horse feed. They broke the fall, but barely. Impact drove the air from her lungs. Her head cracked against something hard. Stars exploded behind her eyes. Everything went dark at the edges. Through the darkness, she heard Warwick moving, heard him grunt with pain, heard metal scraping as he grabbed for his fallen gun. She tried to move, but her body would not obey. Warwick stood over her, bleeding from a gash on his forehead, limping but functional. He aimed the gun at her face. You cost me everything. A rifle shot cracked through the warehouse. The bullet hit Warwick's gun hand. He dropped the weapon, screaming, cradling his mangled fingers. Josiah stood 20 feet away, rifle still raised, his face carved from stone. Marshall Hatcher appeared with his badge held high and his shotgun pointed at Warwick's chest. Ezekiel Warwick, you are under arrest for human trafficking, murder, and about 100 other crimes I am going to enjoy charging you with. Warwick laughed. Even bleeding and beaten, he laughed. Arrest me. I will be out in a week. You know how many people I own in this territory. Do not care, because you are going to federal prison, where your friends cannot reach you. 2 of Warwick's guards were dead. 3 surrendered. The cellar cage stood open. 5 nuns emerged, blinking in the lamplight, hardly believing they were free. They saw Abigail on the ground and rushed to her. Sister Abigail. The eldest sister, Catherine, knelt beside her. We thought you were dead. Abigail tried to speak. Her head felt like it was splitting open. I thought I was too. Josiah appeared above her. His hands were gentle as he checked her for broken bones, for bleeding, for anything that meant she would not be getting up. Anything broken. Everything hurts. That is not an answer. Then no, I do not think so. He helped her sit up. The world spun. She leaned against him and let herself be weak for just a moment. Let herself be held by someone who had risked everything and asked for nothing. We did it. They are safe. His arms tightened around her. Safe, Doris. She looked up at him, saw something in his face that made her breath catch. Not gratitude, not duty, something deeper. In the loft above, they found Daniel Stone, 14 years old, thin and scared, but alive. Marshall Hatcher carried him down, and Clara burst into the warehouse, having followed despite being told to stay behind. Mother and son collided in the middle of the floor, both crying, both holding on like they would never let go. The ledger was secured, photographed again for extra evidence. Witness testimony gathered from all 5 nuns. Father Michael was carried out on a stretcher, bottled but alive, still muttering prayers. Dr. Henderson said he would live, but would need weeks to heal properly. Dawn broke over Fort Benton. Marshall Hatcher loaded Warwick into a reinforced wagon, hands and feet shackled, surrounded by deputies Hatcher had telegraphed for. The man who had terrorized the territory for years was finally caught, finally stopped. Father Michael, despite his injuries, asked to speak with Josiah and Abigail before the marshal took him to testify. They sat beside his bed in Henderson's clinic. I was wrong about you both. Abigail started to speak, but he held up his hand. The marriage might have started as a bargain. I understand that now. But what you did last night, that was covenant. Real covenant. The kind that costs something. He looked at Abigail. I will write to Mother Superior. Explain the circumstances. Recommend full dispensation from your vows. Father, you will be released legitimately, free to choose your path, whether that path includes the order or not. Josiah's voice was quiet. And if she wants to go back, Father Michael looked at Abigail. Do you, She opened her mouth to answer, closed it, opened it again. The words would not come because she did not know what the words should be. Everything she thought she knew about herself had been stripped away in the space of 5 days. The vows that defined her, the identity she clung to, the certainty that being Sister Abigail meant something. All of it was gone. And what was left was just her. Just Abigail. A woman who had broken sacred promises and saved lives and fallen from a second-story window and somehow survived all of it. I do not know. Father Michael nodded like that was the answer he expected. Then you have time to decide. The church is patient, and God, I think, is more patient still. Marshall Hatcher appeared in the doorway. Time to go. Trial is set in Denver, 2 months. You will both need to testify. He looked at Josiah and Abigail. You did good work here. Dangerous work. Stupid work if I am being honest. But good. He tipped his hat. I will make sure Warwick hangs. That is a promise. The wagon rolled out with Warwick shackled inside, screaming threats that nobody listened to anymore. The 5 rescued nuns were placed in Clara's care until the church could send an escort. Daniel stayed close to his mother, still afraid to let her out of his sight. And Josiah and Abigail stood together in the morning light, exhausted and battered and alive, bound together by choices neither of them had planned and vows that meant more than the paper they were written on. 3 weeks passed. Father Michael healed slowly, writing his letter to the church. The rescued nuns recovered, telling their stories to anyone who would listen. Clara's boarding house became a temporary sanctuary full of women learning to be free again. Marshall Hatcher sent word that the trial was proceeding, that Warwick's network was being dismantled, one arrest at a time. But Josiah and Abigail barely spoke to each other. Separate rooms, polite distance, both of them afraid to name what had changed between them in that warehouse when she fell and he caught her. When she risked everything and he followed without question. The autumn cold deepened. The first snow threatened the mountains, and still they did not speak about what came next. About whether the marriage was still just paper or whether somewhere between the creek crossing and the warehouse floor it had become something neither of them knew how to escape. October came to Fort Benton with cold mornings and the threat of snow hanging in the air like a promise nobody wanted kept. 3 weeks had passed since the warehouse raid. 3 weeks since Abigail fell from that railing and Josiah caught her with a bullet instead of his hands. 3 weeks since Father Michael wrote his letter to the church and sealed it with prayers and hope. The boarding house had become something like a sanctuary, 5 nuns recovering, Clara and Daniel rebuilding trust, Dr. Henderson checking wounds and changing bandages, and Josiah and Abigail moving around each other like two people trying very hard not to touch. They kept separate rooms, ate meals together, but talked about nothing that mattered. The weather, the progress of Father Michael's healing, the news from Denver about Warwick's trial. Safe topics, careful topics, everything except the one thing that sat between them like a living creature neither wanted to name. Clara noticed. She noticed everything. You two barely talk. Josiah was checking his rifle at the kitchen table, cleaning the barrel with an oiled cloth the way some men pray the rosary. Repetitive, meditative, a way to keep his hands busy so his mind could stay quiet. Nothing to say. Or too much. He did not answer, just kept cleaning. Clara sighed and left him alone with whatever he was running from. Upstairs, Abigail sat in her room with the window open, despite the cold. She could see the mountains from here, the high peaks already white with the early snow. Josiah's mountains, where he would return eventually because men like him did not belong in towns with too many people and too many questions. She still wore the habit, could not quite bring herself to take it off permanently, even though Father Michael had told her the dispensation was coming. The fabric felt like armor now instead of identity, something to hide behind when she did not know who she was supposed to be. Sister Catherine, the eldest of the rescued nuns, knocked softly before entering. She had become something like a mother to the younger sisters, the one who held them when they woke screaming, who reminded them they were safe now, who prayed with them when prayers were the only thing that made sense. "May I sit?" Abigail nodded. Sister Catherine settled into the chair by the window. Her own habit freshly washed her face, still bearing the marks of what Warwick's men had done, but her eyes clear and strong. "You saved us. You know that, do you not? We all saved each other." "No, you broke your vows, married a stranger, walked into that warehouse knowing you might die. That was you, Abigail, nobody else." Abigail's hands twisted in her lap. "I did not have a choice. We always have a choice. You chose courage over comfort, life over doctrine. That is not nothing." Sister Catherine reached over and took Abigail's hand. "The younger sisters look at you and see what they thought a nun should be. Obedient, quiet, certain. But I look at you and see something better. I see a woman who learned that serving God sometimes means breaking the rules God's people made. Father Michael says I can be released from my vows, properly, through the church. And what will you do?" Abigail looked out at the mountains again. "I do not know. Because of him." The question hung there. Abigail wanted to deny it, wanted to say her confusion had nothing to do with Josiah Cole and everything to do with faith and identity and 8 years of living one way and suddenly having to learn another. But she had never been good at lying. "Yes, because of him." Sister Catherine smiled softly. "Love is not a sin, child, even for us, especially for us. We are brides of Christ, yes, but Christ himself said the greatest commandment is love. He did not specify what kind. I took vows. You did, and those vows mattered. But you also took new vows in that judge's office. And I suspect those matter too." Before Abigail could respond, Clara called up the stairs. A telegram had arrived. Abigail descended to find everyone gathered in the front room. Father Michael sat in a chair, his wounded leg propped on a stool, looking pale but present. The other nuns clustered together. Daniel stood close to his mother, and Josiah leaned against the wall near the door apart from everyone else, like he was already half gone. Clara held the telegram. "It is from the church, the Mother Superior in St. Louis." She handed it to Abigail. The paper felt thin and fragile, like it might tear if she breathed too hard. The words were simple and direct. "Sister Abigail Brennan, your request for dispensation has been reviewed by the bishop. Given the extraordinary circumstances as testified by Father Michael Donnelly, your vows are hereby dissolved. You are released from all obligations to the order. You may return if you wish, but the choice is yours. May God guide your path, Mother Superior Catherine." The room went silent. Everyone staring at her, waiting for a reaction, waiting to see if she would cry or celebrate or collapse under the weight of freedom she had not asked for but had earned anyway. Abigail felt nothing. Or maybe she felt everything at once, and it all canceled out into a numbness that felt safer than any real emotion. I am free. Father Michael's voice was gentle. You are. What does that mean? It means you are Abigail Brennan, not sister, just Abigail. And everything else is yours to decide. She looked at Josiah. He met her eyes for just a moment before looking away. But that moment was enough. She spun what he was thinking, saw him already planning his departure, already building the walls that would let him leave without having to say goodbye. 2 days later, the church sent an escort. 2 priests and 4 armed guards sent to bring the rescued nuns safely to the mission in Helena, where they would recover properly and decide whether to continue their vocations or seek dispensation like Abigail had. The morning they were set to leave the boarding house filled with tearful farewells. Sister Catherine held Abigail for a long time. You could come with us. I know, but you are not going to. No, Sister Catherine pulled back to look at her face. Then what will you do? I have no idea. The younger nuns hugged her one by one. Sister Teresa, barely 24, whispered in her ear, "Thank you for showing me that faith can look different than I thought. That serving God does not always mean saying yes to everything the church tells us." I do not know if that is true. It is, and I think you know it. You are just afraid to admit it. Father Michael blessed them all before they departed. He would stay another week until his leg was strong enough for travel, but the nuns needed to go now before the snow made the mountain passes impassable. The wagon rolled out with all 5 women inside, waving, some crying, all of them free, in ways they had not been before Warwick took them. Abigail stood in the street watching until the wagon disappeared. Then she turned and walked back to the boarding house and climbed the stairs to her room and finally took off the habit. She folded it carefully, laid it on the bed like she was laying down a body. Then she put on the simple dress Clara had given her, brown wool that fit well enough, practical and plain. She looked at herself in the small mirror on the wall. Just a woman, no different than any other, except she felt like she was wearing someone else's skin. She found the dispensation papers in her pocket, the official documents that said she was no longer bound, no longer Sister Abigail. Just Abigail Brennan, free to do whatever she wanted, with whoever she wanted, and nobody could say it was wrong. Except she had no idea what she wanted. That was a lie. She knew exactly what she wanted. She just did not know if she was allowed to want it. Downstairs, she heard the sound of a mole being loaded, supplies being packed, the particular rhythm of a man preparing to leave civilization behind and return to the wild places where he belonged. She found Josiah in the alley behind the boarding house, tying gear onto his mule with practiced efficiency. Everything he owned fit into 2 packs: rifle, ammunition, traps, food for the journey, tools for surviving winter in the mountains. You are leaving. He did not look up. Yep. When were you going to tell me? Now, I guess. His voice was flat, carefully empty, like he had scooped out anything that might be mistaken for feeling and thrown it away before she could see. Just like that. We survive all of this and you just leave. What did you expect? He finally looked at her. His eyes were hard. We did what needed doing. It is done. You are free. I'm free. Nothing left but going home. So the marriage is over. It was never real, Abigail. She felt something crack inside her chest, something she had been holding together through sheer will. It felt real. That does not make it so. He turned back to his packing, dismissed her, like she was nothing more than a task he had completed and could now forget about. The anger hit her then, but the quiet, careful anger she had learned to swallow. The real thing, hot and sharp and dangerous. You married me. You risked your life. You held me when I fell. Her voice rose despite her attempts to control it. And now you are just leaving. What do you want from me? He spun to face her, his own control finally cracking. What do you want me to say? I want you to tell me if this mattered, if I mattered. Of course you mattered. Then why are you leaving? Josiah's face twisted, grief and anger and something else struggling beneath the surface. Because I cannot keep you. The words came out raw, like they had been torn from somewhere deep. You are young, you are educated, you have your whole life ahead of you. You can do anything, go anywhere, be anyone. He gestured at himself, at the scars and the missing fingers and the rough clothes that smelled like smoke and mountains. I am a man who is almost 50 years old. I live in a one-room cabin in the middle of nowhere. I have nothing. I am nothing except a hunter who talks to trees because he forgot how to talk to people. His voice dropped. You deserve better than this. Abigail stepped closer, close enough to see the pain in his eyes, close enough to understand that he was not running from her. He was running from the possibility of losing her the way he lost Margaret. You do not get to decide what I deserve. Abigail, you want to know what I want. I want to stop pretending this was just paper. She was shaking now, terrified and furious and more honest than she had ever been in her life. I want to choose, not survival, not obligation, choice, real choice. She took a breath. And I am choosing you. Josiah looked like she had hit him. His hands trembled. His jaw worked, but no sound came out. You do not mean that. I have spent 3 weeks trying not to mean it. I cannot anymore. Another step closer. You are not a charity case to me. You are not a bargain. You are the first person in 8 years who made me feel like a person instead of a role. Who saw me, not the vows, not the habit, me. Tears were streaming down her face now, but she did not wipe them away. I loved God. I still do. But I think I love you too. And I do not know how to reconcile that. But I want to try. The silence stretched between them, forever compressed into seconds. Josiah's face went through a dozen emotions too fast to name. Then finally he spoke. I loved Margaret. Part of me always will. Abigail nodded, prepared for rejection. But she is gone, and you are here, and I do not want to lose you too. He stepped toward her, close enough to touch. If you stay, I have nothing to offer. The cabin is small, winter is hard, life is lonely. You would be giving up every comfort for a man who does not even know if he remembers how to be with someone. She reached up and touched his face, the scar from the grizzly rough under her fingers. I gave up comfort 3 weeks ago. Have not missed it. She smiled through her tears, and lonely is better than empty, which is what I would be anywhere else. He kissed her then, rough and desperate and real. His hands cupped her face like she was something precious he was afraid of breaking. She kissed him back and tasted salt from her tears, or his tears, or both, and did not care which. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. I do not know how to do this. Neither do I. We will figure it out together. The moment shattered when Clara appeared in the doorway, her face white with panic. Josiah, Abigail, you need to see this. They followed her inside. A young soldier stood in the front room, travel-stained and exhausted. He held a telegram that shook in his hands. Marshal Hatcher sent me. Urgent message. He handed the paper to Josiah. The words were brief and terrible. Warwick escaped custody, killed guard during transport, last seen heading northwest toward Montana. Believe he is coming for revenge. Take precautions. Hatcher. Abigail felt her blood turn cold. He is coming here. Josiah crumpled the telegram. Yeah. He turned to Clara. Get Daniel somewhere safe, away from town, now. Anywhere that is not here. He knows this place. He knows you helped us. Go. Clara grabbed Daniel and they were out the door within minutes, the boy protesting, but his mother dragging him away with the kind of strength only fear gives. Father Michael struggled to his feet despite Henderson's protests. I am staying. I have been useless long enough. You can barely walk. Then I will shoot sitting down. God does not require mobility for justice. They fortified the boarding house as best they could, boarded the lower windows, stockpiled ammunition, set up firing positions on the second floor where they would have a better view of anyone approaching. It was not much, but it was something. Night fell, no sign of Warwick. The waiting was worse than action, gave too much time to think, to imagine all the ways this could go wrong. Josiah checked his rifle for the 10th time. Abigail sat beside him at the window watching the street below. Dark and empty except for shadows that might be threats or might be nothing. If we survive this, what happens? He did not look at her, just kept watching the street. What do you want to happen? I want to build something. Not hide, not run, build. Build what? A place for women like me, like Daniel. People Warwick hurt, somewhere safe, somewhere they can heal and learn and decide who they want to be without someone telling them what they are worth. Josiah considered that, the idea of staying, of purpose beyond just surviving winter to winter. That is a lot of work. I am not afraid of work. You would stay in Montana. She looked at him, her eyes clear and certain in the lamplight. If you would? He reached over and took her hand, laced his fingers through hers. Yeah, I would. The attack came at 2 in the morning when humans are at their weakest, and sleep is a weight that makes reactions slow. Fire arrows hit the roof, 3 of them, flames spreading fast through dry wood. Warwick's voice carried through the night, loud and raw with rage. Cole, send out the nun. Josiah moved to the window, saw shapes in the darkness. At least 4 men, maybe more. Go to hell. You took everything from me, my business, my reputation, my freedom. Warwick's laugh was ugly. I took yours from you first, wife for wife. Gunfire erupted. Bullets punched through the walls. Father Michael returned fire from his position by the stairs, his wounded leg forgotten in the rush of adrenaline. Henderson loaded rifles and passed them to whoever needed them. Abigail stayed low, her heart hammering, hands shaking but functional. The roof burned, smoke filled the upper floor. They had minutes before the whole building became an oven. Back door, we need to move. Father Michael shook his head. I will slow you down. My leg. We are not leaving you. You are not leaving me. I am staying, giving you time. Henderson grabbed him. You stubborn old fool. Stubborn young fool when I started. Age just made it worse. Josiah made the decision, grabbed Abigail's arm. Backstairs, now. I am not leaving him. He is giving us a chance. Do not waste it. She wanted to argue, wanted to refuse, but the smoke was getting thicker and the flames were spreading, and Father Michael looked at her with eyes that said this was his choice, and she needed to respect it. Go with God, Abigail. I will see you on the other side. They ran, down the back stairs, through the kitchen, out into the alley behind the boarding house, just as the front wall collapsed inward in a shower of sparks and burning timber. Shots rang out. Warwick's men had expected this. 2 of them blocked the alley. Josiah fired without aiming, pure instinct in years of muscle memory. 1 man fell, the other dove for cover. Marshal Hatcher appeared from the darkness with 8 soldiers behind him. Been tracking Warwick since the escape, arrived just in time to turn the ambush around. Federal Marshal, drop your weapons. Warwick's men scattered. Some surrendered immediately. Some ran. Hatcher's men pursued. The sound of gunfire moved away down the street, away from the burning building. Warwick himself ran toward the river, wounded and desperate. Josiah saw him go, saw the man who killed Margaret, saw 7 years of grief and rage given flesh. He ran after him. Abigail followed. Could not help it. Could not let him face this alone. The riverbank was dark, cold, the sound of water over rocks. Warwick stood at the edge, trapped between the river and the man hunting him. He had a gun, but his hand was still bandaged from where Josiah had shot him in the warehouse. The weapon shook. This is for Margaret. Josiah raised his rifle, aimed center mass. His finger found the trigger. Years of wanting this moment, needing this moment, the chance to make the man who took everything pay for what he did. Warwick laughed, even now, even beaten and bleeding and trapped. Shoot me, make me a martyr, give me the easy way out. He leaned forward, inviting the bullet. Or let me go. Spend the rest of your life wondering when I will come back, when I will take from you again. Because I will. I always do. Josiah's hand trembled. Everything in him screamed to pull the trigger, to end this, to make it right. Abigail's voice came from behind him. Josiah. He did not turn, could not turn. If he looked away, Warwick might run, might escape, might survive to hurt someone else. Go back. Not without you. She moved beside him, put herself between Josiah and Warwick. If you shoot him, you are a killer, not a survivor. He killed Margaret. I know. And he will pay. But not by your hand. Why not? His voice broke on the words. Because I need you to be better than him. Because I need you, not revenge. Josiah looked at her, saw her face in the moonlight, saw the woman who broke her vows to save strangers, who fell from a building and got back up, who chose him when she could have chosen safety. The rifle lowered, just an inch, then another. Warwick saw weakness, lunged. The hidden knife appeared from his boot blade, flashing toward Abigail's throat. She shot him, the pistol she had taken from Josiah's belt without him noticing. One shot, clean and quick, hit Warwick's shoulder, spinning him sideways. He fell. The knife clattered on the rocks. Abigail dropped the gun, stared at her hands like they belonged to someone else. I did not mean to kill. Warwick was still alive, screaming, rolling in pain. Marshal Hatcher appeared with his men and dragged Warwick to his feet, shackled him properly this time, made sure there would be no third escape. This time he goes in a reinforced cell, all the way to the gallows. I will personally see to it. Josiah pulled Abigail against him. She was shaking. He could feel it through her whole body. You did not kill him. You protected. Is there a difference? Yeah, there is. Father Michael survived. The burning building collapsed, but he had made it to the street before the final wall came down. Henderson found him unconscious from smoke, but alive, stubborn enough to outlast architecture. 3 of Warwick's men were dead, 2 captured. The rest fled into the mountains where winter would likely finish what bullets did not. And Ezekiel Warwick, wounded but alive, was loaded into a wagon and transported to Denver under heavy guard, with Marshal Hatcher riding alongside, determined that this time justice would not be cheated. The trial happened in February 1877. Swift and brutal. Testimony from dozens of victims. Evidence from the ledgers. Witness accounts from Josiah, Abigail, Father Michael Clara, the rescued nuns. The jury deliberated for less than an hour. Guilty on all counts. Ezekiel Warwick was hanged on a cold morning with snow falling. Marshal Hatcher sent word by telegram. Justice served. Network dismantled. Women freed. But the work was not over. Could never be completely over. Because there were always more men like Warwick. Always more women who needed saving. Always more battles to fight. 6 months after the warehouse raid, spring came to the Bitterroot Mountains. Josiah's cabin had been expanded. A second room, a larger kitchen, a small bunkhouse built nearby where women could stay while they healed and decided what came next. The sign out front read Margaret's Refuge, a place for those running from men who thought women were property. A place where the law could not quite reach, but justice still mattered. Abigail ran it with the same fierce determination she had once given to her vows. Medical care, teaching, counseling, helping women remember they were human. Josiah provided security, hunted, built, fixed things that broke, and slowly, painfully learned how to open his heart again to the idea that life could be more than just survival. They did not marry again, not right away. The paper marriage still stood, still protected Abigail, but it felt hollow, a shell around something that had grown into more than paper could contain. Spring evening, rain falling soft on the cabin roof. Abigail was cooking something that smelled like herbs and venison. Josiah was repairing a harness that had split. Comfortable silence between them. The kind that comes when 2 people do not need words to fill space. Do you regret it? He looked up from his work. Regret what? Me, this, all of it. He set down the leather and the needle. I regret Margaret dying. I regret not stopping Warwick sooner. But you never. She smiled, small but real. Even when I am stubborn. Especially then. A knock at the door interrupted them. Father Michael stood there leaning on a cane, now his leg healed, but never quite right again. He had been visiting monthly, checking on the refuge, providing spiritual counsel for the women who wanted it, and friendship for those who did not. I have news. They invited him in, gave him coffee, waited. Your dispensation is complete, finalized by the bishop himself. He pulled papers from his coat. Your marriage is now legitimate, in the church's eyes, recognized as a true sacrament. Abigail and Josiah exchanged a look. What does that mean exactly? Father Michael smiled. It means you were married out of necessity, but now if you choose, you can be married in truth, vows given freely, before on, no more bargain, just covenant. He looked between them. If you want it. Abigail's hand found Josiah's under the table, their fingers laced together. There is something else you should know, Father. Her voice shook slightly. I am pregnant. The silence was absolute. Father Michael's face went through shock, and then joy, and then concern in rapid succession. Josiah's grip on her hand tightened until it almost hurt. What? She looked at him. 2 months, maybe a little more. I am sure. His face was unreadable. Shock, fear, something else underneath. You thought you could not, after everything. I thought God closed that door, but apparently he left a window open. Tears started down her face. I am terrified. I am joyful. I am everything at once. She searched his eyes. Are you okay with this? Josiah stood, walked to the shelf where Margaret's Bible still sat, opened it to the page with the dried flower pressed inside. The flower Margaret had picked the day she found out she was pregnant. The promise that life continues. He brought the book back, showed Abigail the flower. Margaret pressed this, said it was a promise that life finds a way even when we think everything is ending. He closed the book carefully. I lost her, lost our child, thought that door was closed for me too. He knelt in front of Abigail, took both her hands in his. But if you are willing, if God is willing, then I am. I will be a father, a husband, whatever you need, just do not leave. She cupped his face in her hands. I am not going anywhere. Father Michael wiped his own eyes. Then perhaps we should make this official, a proper ceremony, before the child comes, before winter comes, while there is still time. He smiled. Unless you have objections. Abigail looked at Josiah. Do we need a ceremony? We are already married. Paper or no paper, you are mine. I am yours. That is true whether a priest blesses it or not. Father Michael laughed. That is probably the best theology I have heard all year. But I will bless you anyway. For the child, if nothing else. The ceremony happened on a summer evening. No church, no congregation, just the three of them in front of the cabin, with the mountains watching and the forest listening. Father Michael read from his prayer book the words familiar and ancient and true. May God bless this union, not because of paperwork, but because it was born in sacrifice, built in faith, and sustained in love. You chose each other when you did not have to. You fought for each other when it would have been easier to run, and you built something good from the wreckage of evil. He smiled at them both. I pronounce you husband and wife, in the eyes of God and man, for as long as you both shall live. Amen. They spoke it together, a promise, a prayer, a hope. The kiss was gentle, real, the first kiss of their true marriage instead of their bargained one. Months later, deep winter, February again, but a year changed from the last. Abigail stood in the garden behind the cabin, heavily pregnant, now teaching a young woman who had arrived 3 weeks ago how to plant seeds in boxes for the spring. The woman was maybe 19, thin, scared. One of a dozen who had passed through Margaret's refuge since it opened. How did you survive it being treated like cargo? Abigail thought about the question, about the wagon and the rope, and the moment she thought she would die, and the moment she decided to live instead. I stopped thinking like cargo, started thinking like a person. She touched her swollen belly. And I found someone who saw me that way first. Josiah appeared from the tree line, a deer over his shoulder, his breath making clouds in the cold air. He saw Abigail and smiled. The expression still looked strange on his face. Unused, but real. She waved, he waved back. The young woman watched them. You love him. I do. Does he know? Abigail laughed. I shot a man to protect him. I think he knows. That night they sat by the fire, Josiah's hand on her belly, feeling the child move. Strong kicks, healthy, alive. What if I am terrible at this being a father? What if I am terrible at being a mother? Then we will be terrible together. She leaned against him, fitting into the curve of his body like she had been made for that exact space. Margaret would be proud of you. You think, I know, you turned her death into something that saves lives. That is not nothing. He kissed the top of her head. She would like you too. Would probably say you are too stubborn, but she would like you anyway. Stubborn runs in the family, apparently. They sat in comfortable silence, the fire crackling, the wind outside, the baby moving between them like a reminder that life continues even when you think it cannot, even when you think you have lost everything. Life finds a way. Morning came clear and cold. Abigail woke to find Josiah already outside chopping wood for the stove. She joined him wrapped in blankets, watching him work. You know you do not have to prove anything. The wood will keep. I know, but I like having enough. For you, for the baby, for whoever comes next needing help. He set down the axe and came to her. I spent 7 years hiding in these mountains, convinced I was done with people, done with caring, done with everything except surviving one more winter. He pulled her close. Then you showed up in a wagon and ruined everything. Sorry. Do not be. Best ruin of my life. She stood on her toes and kissed him. Mine too. Behind them, the sun rose over the Bitterroot Mountains, touching the snow with gold, turning the whole world bright and new. And in that light, two people who had been broken and lost and afraid stood together, bound by choices they never planned and vows that meant more than any paper could say. Ezekiel Warwick had tried to make Abigail cargo, had tried to reduce her to a price and a destination and a thing to be owned. Instead, he had set her free, free to become someone she never imagined. Not a nun hiding from the world, not property to be traded, but a woman who chose her own path, who built something good from the worst kind of evil, who learned that sometimes serving God means breaking the rules that men made in his name. Margaret's Bible sat on the shelf, the pressed flower inside still bright after all these years. A reminder that life continues, that love finds cracks to grow through even in the hardest soil, that two people damaged by the same evil can heal each other if they are brave enough to try. The Bitterroot Mountains were still hard, winter still brutal, life still lonely at times, but not empty, never empty again. Because Josiah had Abigail and Abigail had Josiah, and together they had something neither thought they would find again. Hope. And that in the end was enough.